Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. We'd like to thank Cloud Native Computing Foundation for sponsoring our podcast from CloudNativeCon KubeCon Berlin. Thanks very much for the support here. We've had a great show. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at CloudNativeCon KubeCon in Berlin. And I'm here with Patrick Chanezon of Docker. How are you?
Hey, Alex. Very well, thanks. Pretty excited.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Containerd, and I want to discuss its evolution, but in the context of Docker's mission, which I've always been intrigued by from its beginnings, when it became really apparent to me that Solomon and you as well really hit it on the head when you're talking about the need to program the internet. And if you're going to program the internet, then it's going to require a lot more simplicity because there'll be a lot more people developing for it, right? And there'll be lots of different applications and things will need to be configured differently. And I think we're really seeing that now, really with like the physical manifestation of the internet, where we're seeing like bicycles that are that you don't have to bring to a station if you rent them. You can just, they're connected via GPS. These are the kind of things that we're starting to see in our physical reality. So I'm curious on your perspective then, we can talk about Containerd, but why don't we first talk about how we've gotten here?
Yeah, definitely. So as you said, our mission at Docker is to build tools of mass innovation. That's how we frame it. And what we mean by that is that there are lots of new technologies that are coming out, but some are really hard to use. And what we're trying to do is to make them simple to use so that a mass of people can use them to innovate. And what we identified as our first target is programming the internet. And what we mean by that is that the best vehicle for innovation right now is software tied to all these devices that are getting connected to the internet. So you were mentioning bicycle, but here I'm thinking as well as like industrial equipments,
right?
Robots, drones. I've seen some customers doing some really crazy stuff with Docker. And all these today require a different tool chain, different artifacts, ways of packaging things, different operating systems. And so coding for them requires a lot of specialized knowledge. And what we're and plus building a system that is composed of an industrial equipment sensor, a gateway inside of the factory, and then a cloud platform to process all this data, and then a web app to analyze all this, and a mobile app with that. In order to build that end-to-end system for a single company use case requires a lot of very specific talent and a lot of very specific workflows and tool chains, as well as a distributed computing fabric. So at Docker, we're trying to build that layer to program the internet. That's what it's about. And that goes with a lot of simplification. And as you said, one of the successes of Docker was really about the ease of use. Developers adopted it because it made them more productive and it was very easy to use. So a lot of opinions are going into the user experience that we provide at Docker. And then there's a second movement to that, which is so we're like these big like customer-focused companies, consumer companies like Google or Facebook or Apple, who focus on the end user first. They build a product, and then they shed out open source components that people can reuse for other stuff, like WebKit for Apple, or TensorFlow or Kubernetes for Google. At Docker, we do the same. So one of the things I presented this morning is you see this ramp up of adoption of Docker through the number of pulls in the hub going from 1 billion to 1 billion to 1 million to 1 billion to 11 billion today. And as we ramp up in adoption, we're shedding out components that can be reused. So things like libnetwork and later on runc, the reference implementation for the OCI spec, SwarmKit, InfraKit that we announced at LinuxCon here in Berlin back in October, and then Containerd is the last of these components that can be used independently by software plumbers who are building their own systems. And so the Kubernetes community is one of them.
So tell us about Containerd and, and how that fits into this story. Perhaps you could explain what Containerd is for our listeners out there.
Yeah, definitely. So Docker is a full platform to build, ship, and run applications and build distributed applications. And so it is made of lots of different components. There are components to manage infrastructure. It's called InfraKit. One component for orchestration, it's called SwarmKit. There's the build system to build your images and all that. But at the heart of it, there's this component that we call the core component runtime, and that's Containerd. And what we've done is that Containerd already was running containers. We just designed it with a roadmap to a 1.0 version of it to extract all the core container runtime functionality so that it can be used separately outside of Docker. So we are refactoring the Docker codebase to extract Containerd, and we're designing Containerd in a way so that it can be used by Kubernetes. And I think the best characterization I've seen of Containerd is by Tim Hawkin, one of the tech leads for the Kubernetes project from Google. When we did the Containerd Summit at Docker a month ago, he expressed it really well. He said, Containerd has all the stuff that we want from Docker with none of the things that we don't want from it. Because Kubernetes is using Docker today, but they prefer something smaller, and that's that core runtime component called Containerd.
So how does that then evoke that quest for simplicity that we started this conversation with?
Yeah, so Containerd is one of the plumbing components, and what it provides is the portability. So Containerd will run on Linux. Microsoft will work on it to make it work on Windows as well. So it will run containers everywhere. Then the Containerd itself doesn't provide simplicity. It provides APIs for higher level systems to build however they want. And so when you're looking at the Kubernetes API, there's a lot of knobs and complexity in there. It's a technology that's really designed for system operations or sysadmins who really want all the configurability in a product. On the Docker side, we're building simplicity out of it. So when you're running Docker, it's Containerd who's running your containers behind the scenes, and but you can use Docker in a very easy way with very easy commands. And we try to make the easy things really easy to use, and the more complicated things possible.
More complicated things possible. So what might that be?
Oh, so what might that be? Security, for example.
Right.
I forgot the name of the speaker. There was a speaker from Red Hat, Clayton Coleman, I think.
Clayton Coleman, yeah.
Yeah, so Clayton gave a talk after Aparna this morning that I found super interesting, where he said security is a very big concern for Kubernetes. And then he had a slide with, on one side, all the things that we have for security in Kubernetes today, and on the other side, it was all the things we want in security for Kubernetes tomorrow. And actually, if you're looking at that slide, the right part, the thing they want for tomorrow, you can have it today in Docker. So we implement some security features like a node identity, for example, or automatic TLS between the different nodes in your swarm, or secrets management with secrets that are encrypted at rest. So we have all that in Docker today.
It's very interesting, the evolution of this story that started with, the creation of OCI, and I know there's been some a lot of discussion about OCI and and how it's progressed, and it's taken longer for it to get to 1.0. Does Containerd make it easier to get to 1.0 for OCI?
No, I wouldn't say so. Containerd is on top of OCI. So Containerd actually includes runC, which is the OCI reference implementation of the runtime spec. So OCI has two specs,
The runtime
and the image format.
Right.
So Containerd will implement both.
Okay.
And actually it's the same people working on both projects. So Michael Crosby on our side is working on runC and the runtime spec.
Will that help it progress faster or no?
No, the spec is nearly ready. I think they have a cut of the 1.0 RC for the spec for the runtime.
Okay.
And they made lots of progress on the image format.
Right.
I'd say maybe Containerd will help the image format spec progress because it will be an implementation of that. But all that stuff is progressing pretty fast, in my opinion. Like, we'll have 1.0 versions of the spec pretty soon, and Containerd 1.0 is slated for the end of June.
Yeah, right.
So we're really getting to that world that we described 2 years ago when we started all this.
And taking care of those very low-level issues. That's good for the community too, isn't it?
Oh, it's awesome. It's good for everybody.
Yeah.
It's good for the community. It's good for customers because then they can have true portability between different implementations of the specs.
Does that make it possible for Docker to think more about how it may offer Kubernetes to its own customer base?
Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see if they demand it. Right now, we see a lot of demand for our commercial products. And what they like in there is both the simplicity as well as full featuredness and some differentiation in security, for example. Mm-hmm. So until they ask for it, maybe we could provide that. But for now, we don't see a need for that.
So it seems like the community has grown up a lot over the past, I'd say, 6 months or so. Would you agree with that?
The community, the Kubernetes community?
Yeah, the Kubernetes and the Docker community.
Oh yeah, both of them. Like, Docker community has been growing at astonishing rates.
They're growing, but there seems to be a better sense of themselves, right? There's more clear identity of who they are.
Oh, definitely.
And that seems to be helping relations, which, in a very competitive environment can be strained at some point.
Yeah, what happened in other industries happening here, where you have a lot of innovation, and then at some point there are some lower layers where everybody agree on how it should be done. So these ones are ripe for standardization. That's what happened with OCI. And then at higher levels, you may have layers where it's good to standardize on a single implementation, and then everybody works on the same code base. That's what's happening with Containerd. But then there are some upper layers where there's still lots of competition, and we can see that in orchestration right now, where differentiation is happening in terms of security, for example.
So what's the story moving forward for Docker? Container, as it relates to Containerd. How should customers view how should customers view Containerd?
Yeah.
How should the community view Containerd? How does Docker view developing Containerd going forward?
Yeah, so I'd say for the community, Containerd is kind of the de facto implementation of a core container runtime.
Right.
And because the whole industry is going to collaborate on it, like all these 5 cloud providers who joined it when we announced it, you'll have a stable core code base that everybody can rely on. So it will make all the systems more resilient and more solid. So that stable core container runtime, everybody can innovate on top of that. Then in terms of the ecosystem, I'd say everybody will be able to innovate faster on top of that, including us. And then for customers, it's a gauge of stability because they'll have a whole community evolving that core container runtime together. So I think it's really a win for everybody.
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for taking some time to talk today. about Containerd and Docker and its roots and the community and going forward. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex, and have fun at the conference. It's
yeah, you too.
Great community.
We'd like to thank Cloud Native Computing Foundation for sponsoring our podcast from CloudNativeCon KubeCon Berlin.